By the 4-minute mark, the arena was doing something it had never done before. It was going quiet. Not fully silent. The crowd was too large for that. But the roaring had faded down to a low, wide murmur. The kind of sound a crowd makes when it no longer knows what to say. Tens of thousands of beings sat in their tiered rows and watched the sand below them, and did not cheer. Because cheering would have required knowing which outcome to root for. And that certainty had quietly left the building somewhere around the 2-minute mark, and had not come back. Vara was bleeding from a cut above her left eye ridge, and from a long scrape along her upper right arm, where the scale plating had cracked under repeated impact to the same spot. She had not bled in an arena in 11 years. The last time it happened, she had been fighting a Drenic warrior who stood 9 feet tall and weighed nearly 3 times what she did. And even then, it had been minor, and she had finished the fight within the next 40 seconds. This was different. Cole was bleeding from 4 places: his forearm, where her scale had caught him, his lower lip, where an impact had split it, a gash across his left shoulder that he could not entirely account for. He must have caught something on the way through one of her grab attempts, and a cut along his right cheekbone that stung when he moved his face in certain directions, which he had mostly stopped doing. He was breathing harder now. His lungs were working. His legs were tired in the specific way that legs get tired when the ground keeps shifting under your feet, and every step is a small decision. But he was standing. He was still, completely, frustratingly present. Vara was pressing harder now, and that was her problem. She had spent her entire career finishing fights quickly, and quick fights do not require strategy. They require power and speed, and the ability to close distance before the other being can think. She had all of those things. What she did not have was a plan for the 4th minute, because there had never been a 4th minute before. She was putting more force into each move now, swinging wider, reaching farther, spending energy she would have saved if she had believed she needed to save it. And every time she overextended, Cole was there. He was not winning with strength. He was winning with the same thing he had used to survive 11 hours in a cage: patience, observation, and the very specific human ability to catalog and adapt in real time. He had learned her tells, the way her upper right shoulder dropped half a second before she committed to a grab, the way her weight shifted back on her right heel when she was setting up a forward lunge. Small things. The kind of things that only show up after the 3rd or 4th repetition, and only if you are watching for them. He watched for them. What no one in the arena knew, not Vara, not the Vrethkai elder on his platform, not the Solhari diplomats leaning over the railing, was who Cole Hardin actually was. He was not a soldier in the way that most species understood soldiers. He was not a trained duelist, or an arena fighter, or a warrior of any dedicated kind. What he was, specifically, was a man who had grown up on the eastern edge of a Montana valley where the winters came fast, and the nearest town was 45 minutes away, and the land pushed back against everything you tried to do on it. His father had taken him hunting before he was 10, not for the hunting itself, but for what hunting required: stillness, patience, reading an environment with your full attention, and not panicking when things went sideways, because things always went sideways. He had taken that foundation and spent 6 years in the Martian Exterior Forces, which was less a combat unit and more an endurance exercise. Mars was not a comfortable planet. Mars was a place that was trying to kill you in a polite but persistent way, and the people who came out of 6 years there were not tougher in the dramatic sense of the word. They were just very, very good at continuing to function when everything was uncomfortable, and nothing was going the way it was supposed to. After that, the Recon Division. Long missions, small crews, systems that no one had mapped properly yet. The kind of work where you had to solve problems with whatever was in your pockets, because there was nothing else. He was not superhuman. His bones broke like anyone's bones. His blood was the same temperature and color as every other human's. He was not augmented, not enhanced, not specially designed for this. He was just what 200,000 years of stubborn human survival had produced. A being that learned from pain, that adapted under pressure, that found a way through, that got up when it was knocked down, because getting up was simply the next step in the process. Vara did not know any of this. She had been handed a file that said Grade 3 soft tissue organism and had not read past that line. She came at him hard at the 4-minute 30 mark, both upper arms driving forward, and both lower arms sweeping up. A pincer move that had ended 3 fights immediately. Cole read the shoulder drop, took 1 step left, let the upper arms go past him, felt the lower arms catch his legs, and went down deliberately, rolling with the direction of the grab instead of against it, coming up on 1 knee and driving the heel of his palm into the joint she had been favoring on her lower right arm. The joint bent wrong, just slightly, just enough. Vara made the same sharp low sound as before, but louder this time, and stepped back. She was looking at him differently now. He had seen that look before, not on alien faces, but on human ones, in training rooms, in the field, in every place where someone had been certain about how something was going to go, and had been wrong about it. It was the look of a plan that had stopped working. It was the look of someone trying to find a version of this situation that made sense, and not finding it. She was still powerful. She could still end this badly for him, if she got the right angle. He was not forgetting that. But she was uncertain, and he was not. She said something then, quieter than before, not to the crowd, and not as a performance. It was almost to herself, low and slow, the words rough at the edges, like something she was still working out. You should have fallen. Cole let out a slow breath through his nose. His hands were loose at his sides, ready, but not tense. He looked at her for a moment, really looked at her, not as a problem to be solved, but as another being standing in a bad situation, doing what she had been trained to do, in a fight she had expected to be over a long time ago. Yeah, he said. His voice was even, not hard, not soft, just level. A lot of things should have gone differently today. He moved his foot forward in the sand, but here we are. And then he closed the distance one more time. On the 3rd day, they came for him. Not in the way he had expected. There were no weapons drawn, no shocks, no rough handling of the kind he had been bracing for. 3 guards came into the room and stopped in front of his cage, and one of them, the large one with the spined ridge, held up a flat device and spoke. Cole did not understand the language, but the tone was clear enough. It was the tone of someone telling you that it is time to go. Cole stood up slowly. He put his hands at his sides where they could see them. He had learned a long time ago that the moment before a door opens is the moment when the wrong move costs everything. They put a restraint band around his wrists, a single piece of dense material that locked his hands together in front of him. It was tight, but not painful. They walked him out of the room and down a long corridor that curved slightly, which told him they were moving along the outer ring of the ship. The floor vibrated more here. The crowd noise was louder. They walked for about 4 minutes. Cole counted his steps without thinking about it, the way he always did in new territory. He looked at every door, every junction, every surface. He noted a slight draft coming from a vent panel on his left. He noticed the guards were spaced, one in front, one behind, one beside him, and that the one beside him was slightly shorter than the others, and moved with a small hitch in its right stride, like something in the hip that had healed wrong. The corridor ended at a wide set of doors, made of the same dark metal as the cage bars. The noise behind those doors was enormous. Cole could feel it in his chest before the doors opened. Then they opened. The light hit him first, sharp and white, and much brighter than the cold blue of the cells. Cole blinked, and when his eyes adjusted, he saw the arena. The ceiling arched high above, like the inside of a ribcage, and every surface that was not sand was filled with beings. They were packed into tiered platforms that rose in rings around the central floor, row after row of them, tens of thousands, and they were loud in the way that a crowd is loud when it is happy and hungry and waiting for something it has been promised. The sand was pale and deep, and had been packed down in the center by what Cole guessed was a lot of use. There were dark stains in places that he decided not to think too hard about. The air was warm, and had the specific dry heat of a place that saw a lot of physical effort. Cole was walked out to the center of the floor. The restraint band was removed. One of the guards held out a combat knife, Cole's own knife, the one from his belt, and placed it in his hand without any particular ceremony, the way you hand something back that was never really a threat. The crowd reacted to his appearance with a wave of noise that Cole could only describe as amused. He heard clicking, low hoots, something like laughter, from the Sulhari section, a group of tall, pale beings with narrow faces who were leaning over their railing with wide eyes and comms devices raised to record. On a high platform at the far end of the arena, a Vrethkai elder stood at a speaking position. He was old, visibly so. The scales on his face had gone pale at the edges, and he moved with the careful weight of a being that has been large and powerful for a very long time. Cole would learn his name later. For now, he was just the one speaking into a device that carried his voice across the dome in a language Cole did not know. The crowd cheered at something he said. Then the far door opened. Cole had seen the size briefings on Vrethkai warriors. He had read the numbers: 8 feet, 400 pounds, 4 arms, scale armor rated to withstand rounds that would stop a human in full combat kit. He had read those numbers the way you read numbers about a storm on a planet you have never visited, abstractly, without real weight. Now the weight arrived. She walked out of the far door and into the arena light, and the crowd did not just cheer, it erupted. The noise was physical. Cole felt it in his back teeth. Her name was Vara. He did not know that yet, but he would hear it chanted in the minutes that followed enough times that it would stay with him for years. She was the arena champion, and she looked like something built for the specific purpose of ending fights quickly. Her scale armor was the color of dark stone, layered across her chest, shoulders, and upper arms, in overlapping plates that moved with her like they were part of her body. She had 4 arms, each one thick with muscle from the shoulder down, and she carried no weapon because she did not need one. Her record was 214 fights. She had won all 214. She crossed the sand slowly, not because she was cautious, but because she was not in any hurry. She stopped about 15 feet from Cole and looked at him. Cole looked back at her. She was quiet for a moment. She tilted her head to the side slightly, the way an animal does when it is trying to understand something that doesn't quite fit the pattern it knows. Her eyes moved over him. His height, his build, his torn uniform, the small knife in his hand, and her expression, as far as Cole could read an alien face, settled into something like calm amusement. Then she spoke. She used Galactic Common, which Cole had a basic field level of, enough to understand the shape of a sentence, if not every word. She spoke it slowly and clearly, the way you speak to someone you want to make sure understands, because the understanding is part of the point. You will fall within a minute, human. The crowd responded like she had lit something on fire. Cole did not respond immediately. He let the crowd noise rise and fall. He looked at Vara the way he had looked at the lock on his cage. Not with anger, not with fear, but with the specific quiet attention of someone who has already started working on the problem. He rolled his neck once to the left. His shoulders dropped slightly, loosening. He looked at her forearms. He looked at her knee joints. He looked at the small gap in her armor plating below her left shoulder, where two plates met at an angle. He said nothing. The elder on the platform raised one arm and then dropped it. The ship smelled like iron and something burnt. Cole Hardin had been awake for a long time now, and he had learned the smell of the place the way a man learns the smell of trouble. Slowly, and then, all at once. He was sitting on the floor of a cage. The bars were thick, dark metal, bolted into a floor that hummed with the low vibration of engines running somewhere deep below. The light in the room was pale and blue, cold in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. It was the kind of light that made everything look dead. Cole was 31 years old. He stood 5 feet 11 inches when he was standing, which he was not right now. He had short brown hair, a jaw that looked like it had been hit before and had not cared much about it, and hands that were calloused from years of work that had not been gentle. He was wearing the remains of his duty uniform, a gray and black reconnaissance suit with a torn left sleeve and a long scorch mark along the right side, where something hot had nearly taken his arm off 2 days ago. He was doing push-ups. Not because he was bored. He was not bored. He was thinking, and he thought better when his body was moving. 1, 2, 3. Around him, in other cages spaced evenly along the walls of the room, were other prisoners. He had counted them on the first hour. 17. Most of them were aliens, beings from species he had never seen in person before, only in briefing files that the Outer Systems Recon Division handed out before long-range missions. There was a pair of tall, thin creatures with wide silver eyes who had not moved in hours. There was something low and wide and covered in dark shell plating that breathed loudly through vents on its back. There was a creature in the far corner that looked almost like a deer, except it had 6 legs, and its eyes were on the sides of its head, and it was shaking quietly, and had been shaking since Cole first noticed it. None of them were doing push-ups. Cole finished his set, sat back against the bars, and looked up at the ceiling. He had been captured 41 hours ago. His recon ship, a 2-person fast runner called the Gray Line, had been destroyed during a border survey 3 light-years past the edge of human space. His co-pilot, a young man named Aaron Webb, had gotten to the emergency pod in time. Cole had not. He had been pulled from open space by the Vrethkai ship and had been in this cage ever since. He did not know much about the Vrethkai. Nobody did, really. Humanity had only made first contact with the wider galaxy 14 years ago, and in that time most of the energy had gone into not starting a war, rather than learning the fine details of every species out there. What Cole knew was basic. The Vrethkai were large, reptilian, 4-armed, and very old as a civilization. They had been fighting and cataloging other species for centuries. They rated everything by its ability to survive. They kept records. What he had figured out on his own in the past 41 hours was more useful. He had watched the guards. There were 4 of them, who rotated through the room on a schedule. Each one was tall. The shortest stood about 7 feet, and built wide, with thick scale-covered arms, and a low, heavy walk that said they were used to gravity and used to weight. They wore armor on their chests and shoulders, but not on their legs below the knee. Their joints bent in a way that was slightly different from a human joint. The back of their knees were exposed. So was the gap between their neck and their collar armor when they turned their heads. Cole had a combat knife. The Vrethkai had taken his sidearm and his emergency tools, but they had left the knife on his belt, the way you leave a child's toy, because they did not think it mattered. He kept looking at the lock on the cage door. It was a sliding mechanism, not a key lock. There was a panel on the outside, and the panel required a handprint, or something like a handprint, from one of the guards. Cole was thinking about that. He was also thinking about the noise. Every few hours, from somewhere deeper in the ship, there was a roar. It was not a mechanical sound. It was voices, thousands of them, rising and falling like a tide. Whatever was happening down there, it was drawing a crowd. The creature with 6 legs turned to look at him once. Its eyes were wide and dark, and it made a low clicking sound that Cole did not understand. He looked back at it and gave it a small nod. It clicked again and looked away. On the second day, or what he thought was the second day, since there was no natural light and he was going by his internal clock, a HFY guard stopped in front of his cage. The guard was bigger than the others, with a ridge of dark spines running from the back of its skull down to its shoulder blades. It looked at Cole for a long moment, the way you look at something on a shelf that you are thinking about putting back in a different place. Cole looked back at it, without changing his expression. The guard dropped a strip of something through the bars. It landed on the floor near Cole's knee. It looked like pressed protein of some kind, brown and flat, the size of a playing card. Cole did not eat it. He picked it up, smelled it, set it aside. He watched the guard's hand as it pulled back from the bars. He watched the way the fingers moved. He was counting joints. He was thinking about the lock panel. The guard moved on. Cole leaned his head back against the bars and closed his eyes, but he did not sleep. He was running numbers. He was thinking about Aaron Webb getting to that pod and whether the signal would reach anyone in time. He was thinking about the sound of the crowd somewhere below him. He was thinking about the 6-legged creature in the far cage and the way it had looked at him like it already knew something he did not. He did one more set of push-ups before the lights in the room dimmed for the cycle. When the room was quiet and the guards had rotated out, Cole sat very still and listened. He could hear the engines. He could hear the distant roar, faint now, like wind under a door. He could hear his own breathing, slow and even. He was not going to pretend otherwise, even to himself. But fear was just information. It was his body telling him the situation was serious, and he already knew that. So he thanked it and set it aside, and went back to thinking. He had been in bad places before. Montana winters, a collapsed tunnel on Mars, 3 days in a drifting survival suit after a training accident that nobody liked to talk about. He had gotten out of all of those. He looked at the lock one more time. He was going to figure this out. Vara moved first. She was fast. That was the first thing Cole registered. Not the size, which he had already accounted for, but the speed. For something built the way she was built, the speed was almost unfair. She came across the sand in 2 long strides and spread all 4 arms wide in a sweeping cage formation, designed to trap, close, and crush. Cole had seen the shape of it coming from the moment her weight shifted forward onto her front foot. He dropped. Not back, not sideways, straight down, knees hitting the sand, body folding forward into a roll that took him under the sweep of her lower 2 arms with about 4 inches to spare. He came up out of the roll behind her left side, already moving, and drove 2 knuckles hard into the nerve cluster just behind her left rear knee. It was not a punch. It was a strike. Small, precise, pointed at a specific spot the size of a coin. Cole had found that spot during the hours he had spent watching the guards walk back and forth past his cage. The HFY knee had an exposed nerve junction at the back, just below where the joint bent, unprotected because nothing in their evolutionary history had ever needed to threaten it from that angle. Vara's left leg buckled. Not much, maybe 3 inches, but it buckled. The crowd went silent. It lasted only a second. Just one long, strange second where tens of thousands of beings stopped making noise at the same time, because something had happened that did not fit the story they had come here to watch. Then the noise came back, louder and more confused, A wall of sound with a different texture than before. The cheering was still there, but something had mixed into it. Uncertainty. The specific discomfort of an expectation not being met. Vara recovered fast. She straightened, turned, and came at him again. Her upper arms came in high, and her lower arms swept low. A 4-point closing pattern that was designed to leave no gap. Cole moved left, felt one of her lower hands catch the back of his shoulder, and was thrown sideways hard enough that he hit the sand on his side and slid 2 feet. He got up. That was the part that mattered. He got up quickly, smoothly, the way a person gets up when getting up is simply what comes next. There was no hesitation, no moment of lying still, no visible reaction to the impact. He just got up and adjusted his footing in the sand and looked at her. Vara stared at him. In her 214 fights, she had thrown beings twice Cole's size with that same move, and watched them stay down or scramble backward. She had never watched something get up from it and look at her the way this human was looking at her. Not with anger, not with desperation, but with something closer to focus. Like he was solving something, and she was the problem. Cole circled left. He was staying inside the range where her longer arms were a disadvantage. Up close, the length that made those arms dangerous in open space became a problem. Too much momentum, not enough control. He had figured this out in the first 15 seconds. He stayed tight to her, inside the arc of her best strikes, where she had to work harder to reach him, and he had to work less hard to reach her. He hit the elbow hinge on her lower right arm. She pulled it back. He stepped with her and struck the same spot on her lower left arm. Both lower arms pulled in reflexively, and in that half-second, he drove a short, hard elbow into the gap below her left shoulder plate, the one he had spotted from across the arena, and felt the impact land on unprotected scale. It was low and sharp, and the crowd heard it, and the sound of the crowd changed again. She caught him 30 seconds later. Her upper right arm got around his torso in a grip that closed like a vice, lifting him off the sand completely. For a moment, he was just hanging there, feet off the ground, the arm crushing the air out of him with a steady and enormous pressure. The crowd came back to life. This was what they knew. This was the shape of how things were supposed to go. Cole did not struggle against the grip. He reached up with his free arm and found the pressure point on the inside of her wrist, the one he had tested on Aaron Webb during a long training exercise once, as a joke, except Aaron had stopped laughing pretty quickly, and pressed. It was not about strength, it was about location. The right spot on a nerve cluster needed almost no force, just placement. Vara's grip loosened for 1/2 second. That was all Cole needed. He dropped out of the grip, hit the sand on his feet, stumbled 1 step from the impact of landing, and put distance between himself and her. His ribs ached. He was going to feel that grip for days. He took 1 breath in and let it out slowly and checked himself the way his first field instructor had taught him. Fast assessment, move on, stay present. He was okay. He was cut along his forearm from one of her lower arm scales catching him on the way out of the grip. He was going to bruise heavily across his left side. None of that was a problem. He looked at Vara. She was standing about 10 feet away, breathing harder than she had been at the start. Both her lower arms were held slightly different from before, not damaged, but careful. Her stance had changed. It was tighter, more centered, less open. She was adjusting. Cole was not going to pretend otherwise. She was very good, and she was very strong, and she had 4 arms, and she was 2.5 feet taller than him, and if she got a proper grip on him again, the result might be different. But she had expected to be done by now. He could see it in her posture, the slight tension that comes when the plan has not worked, and there is no backup plan yet, because there has never needed to be one. She had said 1 minute. It had been 2.5, and he was still standing, still bleeding, still watching her with that same quiet expression. Up in the observation tier, 3 Silhari diplomats were no longer recording with their devices. They had put the devices down. They were just watching with their own eyes, which was more attention than they had given anything in a long time. Cole moved forward. He was not waiting anymore. Waiting was not going to win this. He came in low, fast, committed, and the sand churned up around his feet as the crowd rose again to a sound that had no name in any human language, but felt something like awe with a question mark at the end of it. It ended the way most real fights end, not with a single clean moment, but with an accumulation. Cole had been working the same damaged joint on Vara's lower right arm for the last 90 seconds, returning to it every time she opened up the angle, each contact small and precise. Her lower arms had been functioning at reduced capacity since the 4-minute mark. Her upper arms were still strong, still dangerous, but she was compensating for the lower ones now, shifting her balance slightly off-center, and that compensation was pulling her footwork out of the pattern she knew. He came in one final time, stepped inside her upper arm swing by a margin that was close enough that the crowd made a single collective sound, and applied pressure at the same wrist point that had opened the grip during the first minute. Her upper right arm pulled in. He pivoted, got behind her left side, and put her off balance with a simple leg sweep, the oldest move in the world. And Vara, for the first time in 11 years, went down. She hit the sand hard. The sound of it was heavy and final. Cole stepped back immediately. He let go of everything. He stood there, breathing, and looked at her. On one knee now, pushing herself up slowly, her forearms finding the ground. And he made a decision. He dropped his knife into the sand, point first. It stood upright for a moment, then settled. He raised both hands, palms out, open, at about chest height. It was a human gesture. It meant stop. It meant this does not have to continue. It meant I am not going to come forward again. No one in the arena recognized it, but they all understood what it meant. The silence that followed was the deepest the dome had been since it was built. Not the excited silence of a crowd holding its breath for a finish. This was a different kind of silence. The silence of something being rearranged. The silence of a room full of people who have just been shown something that does not fit what they thought they knew, and who are trying, quietly and carefully, to find somewhere to put it. Vara was still on one knee. She looked up at Cole. She looked at the knife in the sand. She looked at his open hands. After a long moment, she lowered her head. It was a small gesture, just a slight tilt forward. Cole had no way of knowing what it meant in Vrethkai terms. He would learn later, much later, that it was the closest thing their culture had to the word enough. But he nodded back, because nodding back seemed right. Then, from somewhere in the upper tier, a sound started. It was slow at first, a single clapping rhythm, deliberate and steady, coming from the section where the Sulhari observers sat. One of them, a tall, pale woman with narrow features named Lyra, a senior diplomatic attaché, had put down her recording device and was clapping with both hands in a slow, measured beat, not celebrating, acknowledging. There is a difference, and everyone in the arena felt it. One by one, others joined in. Not all of them, not even most of them, but enough that the rhythm spread through the dome like something waking up, and for a moment the sound it made was unlike anything that had happened inside those walls before. Up on his platform, the Vrethkai elder stood very still. His name was Commander Soreth, and he had built this arena and run it for 22 years, and had seen things in it that most beings never see in a lifetime. He had expected this fight to last 40 seconds. He had expected it to be a curiosity, a footnote, something the crowd would laugh about on the ride home. He was gripping the railing with both upper hands. His lower hands were clasped together behind his back in the way he held them when he was thinking and did not want anyone to see that he was thinking. His face was unreadable. He gave a quiet order to the officer standing beside him. Cole was to be taken to the medical wing, not back to the cages. The medical wing. The officer hesitated for half a second, which was not protocol, and then carried out the order. Cole was walked off the sand with a guard on each side, and a cut on his cheek, and bruised ribs and a split lip, and as he passed through the far door, the clapping from the Sulhari section was still going. He kept his eyes forward and his breathing steady, and he thought about Aaron Webb and whether the pod signal had reached anyone yet. In the days that followed, the footage moved fast. The Vrethkai arena fights were recorded as a matter of standard practice, archival, not for distribution. But the Sulhari had their own devices, and Lyra had been recording from the moment Cole walked out onto the sand. The file was transmitted along 3 different diplomatic channels within 6 hours of the fight ending. Within 2 days, it had reached 7 species. Within a week, it had been seen by beings on 43 worlds. People watched it for different reasons. Some watched it for the fight itself, the technique, the patience, the specific moment when Vara staggered for the first time, and the crowd went silent. Some watched it because they had been rated and ranked and catalogued by the Vrethkai, and they wanted to see what it looked like when the rating was wrong. Some watched it because they were analysts or diplomats or military advisors, and this was exactly the kind of data point that changed the shape of a conversation. The Drenic ambassador sent a formal communication to the Human Outer Systems Office, requesting the opening of a bilateral channel. The Sulhari reclassified humans in their own records from Grade 3 to a category that translated roughly as undetermined upper limit, which was the highest level of honest uncertainty their classification system had. The Vrethkai did not change their official records, not yet. But Sorith spent 3 evenings reviewing every piece of information his empire had collected on humanity in the past 14 years, and at the end of those 3 evenings, he sent a quiet order to his intelligence division for a full review. The files, he noted in his personal log, were thin, embarrassingly thin. They had looked at humans and seen the surface, the soft tissue, the small size, the short lifespan, the dependency on specific atmospheric conditions, and had stopped looking. They had made a file and put it on a shelf and not opened it again. That, he understood now, had been a significant error. Cole Hardin was released 18 days later as part of a tense diplomatic exchange that had been negotiated almost entirely by a woman named Dana Price, the Human Outer Systems attaché, who had been making a very specific kind of noise in a very specific kind of language for the entire 18 days, polite, precise, and absolutely immovable. She met him at the transfer point on a neutral station and handed him a cup of coffee, because she had been told by his file that he liked coffee, and she believed in the value of small correct gestures. He was debriefed for 2 days. He answered every question fully and without complaint. Then he asked for a week of leave to go home to Montana and go fishing, and the request was approved before he finished the sentence. He did not watch the footage of the fight until much later. When he finally did, he watched it once, all the way through, and then he closed the file and did not open it again. He was not interested in the version of the story where he was the symbol or the lesson or the turning point. He was interested in the version where he was just a man who had been in a bad situation and had figured a way through it, same as always. But the galaxy remembered. Every species that had ever been handed a ranking and told to accept it remembered. Every being that had ever been looked at and measured and found to be less than something remembered. The footage did not need commentary. It did not need explanation. It just needed to be seen. And the next time a Vrethkai champion stood in that arena and looked across the sand and saw a human standing on the other side, small, unarmored, holding a knife that seemed like a joke, the champion did not laugh. She set her feet. She remembered the silence, and she understood, for the first time, that the silence was the warning.